A technology that could erase an entire industry was invented inside the very company that dominated it. The device worked. The engineers proved it. But the executives who saw it understood something else immediately. If this machine succeeded, it would destroy the business that made them powerful. So the technology was not celebrated. It was contained. Because sometimes the most dangerous threat to a company does not come from a competitor. It comes from its own invention. Right now, somewhere in the world, a board of directors is approving a decision that looks perfectly rational. The numbers check out. The risks seem manageable. The analysts agree. In 10 years, that same decision will be cited as the moment everything started to collapse. This is the autopsy of one of those decisions. For most of the 20th century, Kodak was not just a camera company. It was photography itself. By the late 1970s, the company controlled nearly 90% of film sales in the United States and more than 80% of the global market for photographic chemicals and processing. Every roll of film represented a predictable chain of revenue. Cameras sold once, but film was purchased again and again. Development required labs, chemicals, and printing paper, all supplied by Kodak. The company had effectively built a closed economic system around memory itself. The scale of the business reflected that dominance. At its peak, Kodak generated more than $16 billion in annual revenue and employed well over 100,000 people. Its brand was synonymous with reliability, nostalgia, and technological trust. For decades, capturing life's moments meant buying Kodak film. And then, in 1975, something unusual happened inside one of its research labs. An engineer named Stephen Sasson built a crude device using a sensor originally designed for satellites. It captured a black and white image at a resolution that would seem laughable today. The photograph took more than 20 seconds to record and required playback on a special screen. But the implication was unmistakable. The camera used no film. When Sasson demonstrated the prototype to Kodak executives, the reaction was not excitement. The machine worked, but the question it raised was far larger than the technology itself. If photography could exist without film, the foundation of Kodak's entire economic model would disappear. The concern was not irrational. Film was not merely a product line. It was the engine that powered the entire organization. Each photograph taken by a consumer created recurring revenue through film sales, processing, and printing. Digital photography, by contrast, would reduce that entire cycle to a single electronic file. From a financial perspective, protecting film made perfect sense. Film margins were enormous. Digital sensors were expensive and unproven. Consumer demand for digital imaging barely existed, and the technology was years away from matching the quality people expected from traditional photography. For leadership responsible for billions in revenue, prioritizing the profitable present over an uncertain future was a logical decision. So Kodak continued to invest in film. Research into digital technology was allowed to continue, but it remained contained within laboratories and specialized divisions. The company accumulated hundreds of digital imaging patents and built some of the most advanced research capabilities in the field. Yet the strategic center of the business remained anchored to film, the product that had defined Kodak's identity for generations. The deeper danger was structural. Kodak's success depended on a revenue model built around consumables. Film and chemical processing generated profit every time a photograph was taken. Digital photography removed that repeating transaction entirely. A consumer could capture thousands of images without purchasing anything else from the company. The more digital photography succeeded, the less Kodak would earn. Inside that structure, every incentive favored protecting film for as long as possible. Executives were rewarded for preserving margins. Analysts evaluated performance based on quarterly results generated by film sales. Retail partners relied on Kodak processing labs that would become obsolete in a digital world. The organization had built its strength on a system that digital technology would dismantle. While Kodak hesitated, the external landscape began to change. Electronics companies that had never been part of the traditional photography business began entering the market. Firms like Sony and Canon treated digital imaging not as a threat to an existing revenue stream, but as a new technological frontier. For them, replacing film was not a problem. It was the opportunity. Throughout the 1990s, digital cameras slowly improved. Storage became cheaper. Sensors became more capable. Personal computers allowed images to be stored and shared electronically. Each incremental improvement reduced the advantages that film had once held. Kodak did eventually launch digital cameras. But by the time the company attempted to pivot, the economic logic had already shifted. Digital photography rewarded companies skilled in electronics, software, and sensors, rather than chemical processing. The center of gravity for the industry had moved away from film entirely. The transformation accelerated again with the arrival of smartphones. A device carried in every pocket suddenly contained a camera capable of capturing and instantly sharing photographs with the world. The very act of taking pictures, once dependent on film cartridges and development labs, became effortless and nearly free. The economic loop Kodak had built over a century disappeared. Revenue declined year after year as film sales collapsed. Processing labs closed. The vast infrastructure that had once defined Kodak's dominance became a burden the company could no longer support. Thousands of employees lost their jobs as the organization struggled to adapt to an industry that no longer resembled the one it had ruled. In 2012, after more than a century as one of the most recognizable brands in the world, Kodak filed for bankruptcy protection. The company that had helped invent digital photography had been overtaken by the very transformation it once feared. What company today is making the exact same mistake, clinging to the past, while a competitor builds the future?